Welcome to our sixth installment on Software Asset Management 101. In this topic, we really want to dive a little bit deeper into the software asset lifecycle. Up to this point, we've talked more about what is SAM, why is SAM important. We've talked about software entitlement, software discovery, how do we marry those two worlds together with software license management. Now we want to take a step back and look at software from a cradle to grave perspective and really how it fits into other incredibly important business processes within an organization. So you can see here in this visual that our first step in this process is software request. So software request phase is typically the initial step in the software asset lifecycle. During this phase, stakeholders or end users have identified a need for software, and then they go through that request process. Ideally, organizations have a means to make this process easy for their end users, including using self-service portals where they can browse a software catalog that's been curated with standardized software and then request that software. Now, there could be non-standard software as well that can also be requested. Perhaps some reasons for non-standard software could be because the software exceeds a certain dollar amount, or we already have a certain similar technology within our organization, or there's also risk of purchasing that software. And so generally what we would recommend here is that the asset acquisition committee consists of a cross-functional group of IT leaders, and they can evaluate those requests. But when the requests come in, the next phase is that we need to approve or deny that software, right? And once a software request has been submitted, it's important that we have timely and transparent workflows that can automate a lot of that approval process. Now, there are, of course, non-standard or non-automated processes that may exist. But when there are requests that need to be made that need to be approved by actual people and that are not automated, it's important that whether they be budget holders, they may be department heads, they could be IT line managers, or anyone else that has a relevant stake in ensuring that that software can or cannot be used. They're going to assess that software request and then evaluate factors that they may have, like budget constraints, alignment with organizational goals. There could be security considerations and other licensing requirements. Now, ideally, software asset management may be an input, right, into that software approval process, because we're going to check if a software license actually needs to be purchased or if we already have it. And that's where we see it in that software procurement phase, right? This is the next phase of the software asset lifecycle. So after software has been requested, after it's been approved, the procurement phase will begin. And this is really where we are going to perhaps be selecting a suitable vendor or a supplier, or one that we've already vetted for making that software purchase, and then negotiating terms of that purchase. So an entitlement check can be conducted to see if the organization has an existing supply of licenses. But if a purchase needs to be made, then we'll go about those activities of obtaining quotes or negotiating pricing or negotiating various terms. Once that procurement process is complete, the organization acquires that software and then will prepare ultimately for its deployment or usage.
That's right. And sometimes there is no procurement if we already have the license on the shelf, but that's part of that process to determine, do I need to buy this or do we already own it? And we can just deploy. And so after we have gone through that procurement decision, that's where we assign the license. We assign it to the person or the department or the device that will then ultimately pay for that license or be responsible, especially if you have a chargeback model in your organization, where then you can go through and see exactly who has been assigned a license and is ultimately responsible for paying for it through the coming years. And then once that license is assigned and a cost center is recorded, you actually deploy that software, whether we need to install it on a server or allocate a user in a portal or console somewhere on a SaaS interface, and get that person or that department the software they need so they can start using it and getting value out of it. So all of these steps that we've talked about, we want to minimize the time to value, right? So they can get the software as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Therefore, they would be less likely to go around any software asset management process that's in place if they can get their software in a quick manner. Then after that software is installed, that's where the meat of our work lies, and that is managing that asset or that deployment through its life, monitoring it, and understanding where it's installed. Does it move? If it's installed if it's assigned to a user, did that user leave the company? If they do, what do we do with that? Do we put that license back into the pool that can be given to somebody else? Or perhaps you have software installed on a server and it's licensed by processor, and a couple years go by and that server gets upgraded with more processors that then require more licenses. So tracking that asset through its life cycle is key in making sure that you have good governance and good processes in place to make sure that we stay in compliance with our license agreements. And then finally, once the software is no longer have any use, or the company decides to move forward perhaps with another software, or it's be determined end of life by the software publisher, we remove that software, we uninstall it, we dispose of it from the environment, and that ends the life cycle and our responsibility in tracking that software. So this whole process kind of makes up the software asset life cycle for any given software product. And so we're grateful you were with us today. If you have any other questions about this life cycle process, please reach out to us on anglepoint.com.